Thank you, Ms. Kocher, for this multifaceted overview of the nature and effects of the key forces affecting today's global economy and the important role that leaders and innovators must play in addressing our increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and diverse world. We will now have a short question and answer period moderated by Jaswinder Kaur, the Director of the Canada-India Centre. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jaswinder Kaur. Thank you very much, Dr. Kocher, for those very inspiring words. I would like to invite the audience to ask a few questions, and in the interest of time, I thought what we would do is perhaps take a series of questions, and then Madam Kocher could answer them collectively. So if I could please ask you to say your name and affiliation, and ma'am, could I please ask you to come up here? Yes, thank you.
My name is François-Pierre Lesquarnec. I'm a businessman owning some businesses in southern India. And first of all, I want to thank you for your very good speech, and I really embrace your view on diversity. I think it's so important. Secondly, I'm talking, it's a bit self-interested, but I'd like to hear your vision about this day and age of globalization versus restrictions on international fund transfers.
Yes, I think clearly today, what we're seeing is, in fact, two diverse forces playing with each other. There's globalization on one hand, and there is actually restrictive, closed, nationalistic policies in a way playing on the other hand. But I guess, again, we have to take this as a fact of life, because globalization is a process that will not stop. I think, as I spoke about interconnectedness of the world, I think globalization will actually keep moving because of that. But the restrictions that are there on payments are really more coming from individual countries, perspectives about what can be risky, what cannot be risky, the geopolitical implications along with this, and so on and so forth. So the best way that we tackle it is that, you follow all the restrictions that are prescribed to you for doing a business that is yet global. So you participate in the entire global payment systems, but you follow all the, the policies, procedures that are prescribed for you by different countries. So I guess life is difficult, but you still have to do it.
Dr. Kocher, I also wish to compliment you on your exemplary address. My name is Dr. Prabir Nyogi. I'm a visiting fellow at the Canada-India Centre. I have a comment and a question. The comment is, we've already seen the changes with things like SWIFT, Visa or MasterCard, and the electronic payment system have brought about in the banking industry in our lifetime. The question is, how then do you extend retail banking in India, not only to those 15 million people who have $2 a day accounts, but maybe the 150 million people who have no accounts at all, but probably all have cell phones?
Yes, actually, I think, the way developments have taken place in India, that's enabled many of us to reach out to these customers who have so far been unbanked. So because of the fact that connectivity has improved, because of the fact that they have cell phones, today we are therefore not restricted to just opening their accounts only if we have a branch. So, what I always say is that our branch moves with our person. So our person moves just with one handheld device. And that handheld device is so complete in itself that you meet the customer, you look at all the documents. You do not even need that the customer should have kept photocopies of the documents, because you scan the documents right there. You click the photograph of the customer right there. All that gets transmitted online to your back-end system, and the account gets open. And then after that, what you are enabling the customer to do is actually to remit money through the use of the mobile phone, to actually receive. In India, we have various subsidy payments that the government gives. So to receive those subsidy payments directly from the government account to their own account in the bank, and so on and so forth. So I think it is really the use of technology that has made this possible.
This is, of course, what we do in the government of Canada. The vast bulk of our electronic payments, like
Yes.
CBD and so on,
Yeah.
are made electronically.
Yes, yes.
Oh, I believe we have someone at the mic over there. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. The question I have is the debt ratios of Indian companies versus American companies, capital ratios, the pegs, and the price of earning. On one hand, you have Western countries like America, Canada, and so on, where you have great financial standards, and they've been fined, as you know, J.P. Morgan, Citibank. They did few wrong things, but they've been fined billions of dollars. Okay. And then you have on the east side or southeast side, China and India coming up a little bit, and you got this balancing act going on. In between, you got a Middle East, which is a problematic right now because I don't know what kind of standards they are holding to. So in this big universe, on one side, the Western, east side, China, India, and then in the Middle East, and then you have issues like companies, Indian companies, which are trading on the big board, New York Stock Exchange. What is your view on the capital standards, the Indian company standards versus American standards? Because there was talk on Alibaba when it came on IPO at the New York. Do we trust Alibaba? Because Chinese people, can we trust them? Their standards are laxing and so on. But yet, has a market cap of $198 billion. It went through. It sold at the price that they set out to be about $85 a share. So I'm just wondering why we don't have many more Indian companies coming on the big board. Is it because we don't have the strict financial standards which American companies seem to have, not allowing for some of the mistakes they made, and they've been punished?
So, yeah.
Maybe we could take one or two more.
Yes, okay.
So,
Yeah.
so my question is really, can you give us a bit of a input into our
standards.
accounting standards? Are they the same, IFRS, the international standards? The basic stuff, revenue stream, asset balance sheet, current and long-term liabilities and assets. Is it the same standard we follow as American, or Indians have their own standards?
Thank you. My name is Smita Bhatia, and I would like to congratulate you on your degree, Dr. Kocher, and I'm very proud to be a Carleton University graduate myself, and now you are a fellow, and welcome. This is a wonderful university. And my question is not really a question, it's a comment, and it's got nothing to do with financial sector. But here, and you can look around here, in Canada and in Ontario, we are right now facing a challenge in getting students and getting children to be attracted to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and especially girls. And you are where you are because you have, of course, studied and you've done mathematics. You have to do mathematics. I would really, really appreciate it as to the audience over here, if you could say something positive so that our students here can just as be, they can take you as a role model or as an example. It'll be great for our university over here to say that our honorary doctorate person is so accomplished. And I think it's generally a very, you make us all so proud. So we are all very proud to be associated with you, and I really thank you for the lovely, lovely lecture that you gave. It was very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you. The last, yeah.
Dr. Kocher, it's a real pleasure, and you have shared a lot of things with us. Very inspiring, good role model, and I congratulate you. My question is actually more focused on the corporate governance on financial companies. And over the last 7-8 years, it has become very visible to a lot of us who are not necessarily working in the financial field, that but taking interest. I used to work for Nortel, so I know how some of the companies failed. And so what I see, banks and insurance companies, whether it's a North American or a European, we have a big problem in understanding about compensation at senior level, and especially when we see all the mutual funds and ETFs are all controlled by the same companies, then And they all, like for instance, we have 6 banks in Canada. They all are paid about $12 million, including bonuses, and they all each hold each other's ETF or mutual funds, and they vote for each other. They never oppose. And same thing happened with Goldman Sachs and all kind of Lloyds and Barclays. Like, how are we going to manage all this stuff? What do we need to do in order to control these guys so they not screw up our basic savings? Thank you.
And if you can answer that.
That's the first question I can answer. Just keep your savings with ICICI Bank.
Team here.
Okay, but coming to the first question on the accounting standards, I would say the accounting standards are actually, in a way, the global standards that even Indian companies follow. In fact, I can just give you an example of the banking industry, and to say that the Indian banking industry is actually ahead of the global standards and requirements in that sense. And therefore, like in a way the Canadian banking industry, the Indian banking industry stood strong, even in the biggest or the most difficult global financial crisis. The examples there are that while the world over, it's now that the regulators are talking about increasing the minimum capital, what you call the capital, the tier 1 capital ratio for the banks. In India, it was always much higher. Again, today the global regulators are saying that even in the tier 1 capital, equity capital should really be the capital that the banks should hold. In India, tier 1 capital always meant equity capital. The world over now, regulators are saying that banks should keep liquidity reserves. In India, some of you would know that banks are, expected to keep almost equal to 35 to 40% of their deposits in various liquidity reserves, which we call the statutory liquidity reserves, the cash reserve ratio, and so on. Ever since I know of banking, so we've been holding those reserves. Today, there is a lot of discussion about, regulating the compensation in the banking sector. In India, it has always been regulated by the Reserve Bank of India. So I would say that, and even today, as the various norms of Basel III are getting prescribed, if you go back and look at what Indian regulator has prescribed, that is a wee bit stringent than the global Basel norms that have been prescribed. So I would say that, I don't think there is a reason to doubt the accounting standards in India. In fact, in some cases, and I just took banking as an example, India is actually way ahead. Your question I've answered, I should say. But the only other thing I would say is that corporate governance, I think while the regulations keep coming out, and they will keep coming out and making processes and procedures more stringent, but finally corporate governance comes from within an organization, because it's how true and fair you want to be to the regulations really comes from the ethos and the culture of the organization. It is very much possible to tick the boxes and still say that, on paper, I have complied with many of the requirements. But complying in spirit really comes from the ethos and the values of the organization. So beyond a point, it cannot just be the watchdog. It is the organizations, and you really have to therefore, try to distinguish organizations on this basis. And finally, I think mainly to the girls and the women, if I were to say, even if I look at my own self, though I did not come from a very small village, as was being talked about earlier, but I was born and brought up in Jodhpur and in Jaipur, which are not, sorry? Yeah, so you're aware. So these were not large cities in that sense. And, but, and many years ago, I think what I would say is that I was fortunate to been born in a family, first of all, that always believed in gender neutrality. So I think everything starts from home, because those many years ago in a small city in Rajasthan, when we were 2 daughters and 1 son, it was very much possible for the parents to focus only on the son's education. But the environment that I grew up in, all 3 of us were equal, and our education was as important, our 2 girls' education, as was our brother's education. And in fact, one thing I must admit here is that, in the afternoon we spoke about the love affairs with educational institutions. I also have one going in that sense, because my father was actually in the teaching field. He was the principal of the Regional Engineering College in Jaipur. And I think that focus on academics, therefore, was equal for men and women. From there on, I think I was again very fortunate to join an organization which has always been gender neutral. And again, that was not very common when I started my career, but the organization ICICI was always evolved in that sense. But again, the biggest lesson that I've learned here is that, in fact, we did not do anything special for women. What we only did was we ensured that the environment was merit-oriented. That is, everybody knew that a person will get the next responsibility or will get rewarded on the basis of the performance of that individual and the potential of that individual. And we always gave that responsibility or an opportunity to that person based just on the performance and potential, irrespective of the fact whether the person was a male or a female. And to top that, I think the other learning, therefore, for the women is that the women responded by not expecting special privileges, and therefore the women gave as much to the job as was required. I mean, all of us have put in as many long hours as the job required, traveled as much as the job required, rather than saying that I am a woman and therefore I will not be able to do it. So I think the gender neutrality, again, has to work both ways, and that's the only way that women prosper as much. Of course, I think the cooperation of the family is a must, because without that, no woman can achieve whatever she desires to achieve, because all said and done, a woman is trying to get 48 hours out of 24 hours that are in one's life when one is having a career as well as a family. But if one takes it as something that you yourself desire to do, it happens. And it's not an easy task. It requires prioritizing. It requires time management. It requires a lot of organizing your day minute to minute, and not having even a little bit of time to kind of spare. But as I said, most important thing is what is in your mindset. And I believe that for most women, and whether they are in the science technology field or not, I mean, I'm a banker, my daughter is an engineer, but for most women, I think the initial inhibition just comes from within. And if we give up that inhibition and, to say that, oh, I can either do career or manage my family, I think that's the first stumbling block to start with. But if we give up that inhibition and say that I want to do it because I desire to do it, and then, of course, back it up with a lot of hard work, I would say sky's the limit, and it's possible to do both. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Madam Co-Chair. And thank you all very much for those very interesting and challenging questions. Of course, she will be with us for the next 45 minutes or so we'll have an opportunity to engage with her further outside. I would like to conclude this ceremony today by requesting a few words from Mr. Tony Tattersfield, who's the chair of the Carleton University's Board of Governors. Mr. Tattersfield.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Honored guest, President Runte, Senate Clerk Kelly, Dean Plourde, Dr. Koshar. Your address and your responses are simply memorable. Thank you so much. Members of the faculty, board, students, and honored guests. On behalf of the Board of Governors, greetings to our newest graduate and appreciation again for your wise and very inspiring words and commentary. Being myself a proud alumnus of Carleton University, I am simply delighted that we have been able to welcome Dr. Kosher to the Alumni Association. And I hesitate to even admit this, but being a public accountant by profession, I paid close attention to many of the questions that were asked, and particularly to the responses. I took particular note of Dr. Koshar's standing and accomplishments in ICIC Bank, which I know is headquartered in Mumbai. I understand is an Indian multinational banking and financial services company of great repute, and which in 2014, in terms of assets and market capitalization, and there was a question about assets and market capitalization by extension, ranks as the second largest bank in India. Feat indeed. And I'm pleased to extend our welcome to all members of your board and staff who have accompanied you here on this trip to Ottawa. As a member of our university community, I certainly thank you for your leadership in the world of international finance, and note with deep appreciation your bank's support for the Canada-India Centre for Excellence in Science, Technology, Trade and Policy here. I would also like to thank Mr. Dhahan for having created this lecture series in honor of his father, whom perhaps will be able to, if he wasn't listening to it live streamed, will be able to listen to it in its entirety. These lectures are important in advancing the support, the advancement of knowledge, and critical to an understanding of India in Canada and in support of the Indo-Canadian diaspora. Thank you all for being here, for your participation. Do remain with us for a reception, where you are welcome, of course, to continue discussing the ideas presented here this afternoon. And that brings us to a conclusion, so I ask that you would please rise for the retirement of the academic procession. Thank you all very much indeed.